I'm Justin Reeve, president of the Humboldt County Beekeeper Association, and I've been a beekeeper in Humboldt County for 5 years. And today we're going to go inside some beehives and take a look and see what they're doing before winter. Ready to go beekeeping. As you can kind of tell here, this is the entrance and this is the traffic. So you see all the bees coming in here. One thing when beekeeping you'll learn is you don't want to stand in front of the hive when you're working them, because then your back will just fill up with bees because they're trying to come into their home to drop off the feed and the pollen and all the resources they have. So what I'll do here is we could open up this hive. This is what we call a nook, or a nucleus hive. It's a smaller section of a main hive. Deep boxes, which are about this size right here, if they're full of honey, could be 100 to 120 pounds. The medium boxes, which are a little bit smaller, could be between 30 and 35 and 50 pounds. All depends on how much honey they put in there. And right now, this time of year, we're in October, which is the end of the beekeeping season. A lot of times right now we're doing winter prep, so things to keep in mind for people who may not want to be beekeeping but would like to help is planting plants that bloom in the winter time. I mean, you can kind of look around here, there's a lot of little wild weeds, some blue flowers, the yellow. We got some star thistle over there that's going on. But the end of the year and the really beginning of the year, February, March, are crucial times for bees to get resources. They work all year to make honey, and that honey is supposed to be the fuel to help them warm the hive up through the coldest months. And if they don't have that food, then it's a real sad thing, but bees can starve. And bees starve every winter because they run out of food. So planting flowers is a huge bonus to help bees. One thing that's a little different beekeeping that I don't do is I don't use a smoker. Smoking bees does, people think it calms them, but in reality what it does is it sends out an alarm to them that there's a forest fire nearby and that their hive is highly flammable. So given the fact that their home can easily burn, they start to consume all their honey. And they stick their heads in their honey cells instead of trying to sting us, where people feel that that's the calming. So this is a frame here that the bees have made themselves. You can tell because there's nothing there. They've built out all this wax. People ask, where's the wax come from? It comes from the bees. On the bottom of their bellies have 6 cells. In those cells, the backside, there's nothing there. In the 6 cells, they have a gland that secretes wax, which is pretty much just bee fat. So the more honey they consume, the more fat they make, and the more wax they can build. So here, you can kind of see it. There's a little shine inside there. That's the nectar. That's nectar they've brought in from the wild, and they're going to start dehydrating it, and then they're going to start capping it for the winter time. It's pretty cool. There's capped honey up here. That's what this is. They're saving that for the winter. They'll open that up if they have to.
So it's like a honey reserve.
Exactly. Yeah. This is really standard. We're not expecting to see any brood, which is the offspring, the eggs that hatch out into larvae, or cap brood. In the wintertime, since there's not much food available, they decrease the amount of mouths to feed by not having offspring. And so the bees you see here, they call them winter bees because these bees are going to survive through winter. A bee on average only lives about a month and a half. These bees though are going to have to make it for the next 4 months until spring shows up. So they're going to call them winter bees. One thing you'll notice in this hive versus a hive in springtime or summer is there's no drone bees. It's just female workers. They kick out all the drones in the fall because the drones eat, but there's no reason for them to reproduce in the fall and the winter. So instead of feeding them and producing more, the bees politely ask them to leave and they do not return to the hive.
So do they just go off and die then?
Yes. So I'll clear out that capping you see here kind of looks like the capping of the honey, but given where it's at, it's actually brood. So we might look out here and we can get you guys the birth of a baby bee. You can kind of see it right there. And yeah, and so she's gonna sit there and chew her way out. Sometimes her other sisters will come over and help her out a little bit. It needs to be fed and beefed up a little bit, and then it's ready to go. So like right now what's going on is she's coming out and she's hungry. So the next nurse bee that comes around is gonna give her some food. And when that bee is able to pull herself out, she'll dry up a little bit because she just got hatched. She'll eat some food, and then she'll turn around and start cleaning the cell she hatched out of. Well, during right now, it's very low. Queen's ovaries are starting to slow down to stop because they're not going to want to produce any offspring for the winter. But during the early spring, summer, and fall, queen can lay a few thousand eggs a day. So if she was able to lay 1,000 eggs, 21 days later, we'd have 1,000 new workers. Yeah. And she's almost there. Almost there. Sorry. She's still there. So yeah, you can kind of see her right there. And she's a little gray. She's a little gray. And so she's gonna go walk around, dry herself up a little bit, hopefully get fed. And then she's going to get put to work to start getting ready for spring next year. A lot of times when you start beekeeping, they get bees from outside the area, and that's fine to get started with, but if you can raise your own queens and your own bees in your backyard, they'll be that much more stronger and adaptable to your environment, so they're not so susceptible to cold or moisture, or they get used to the food sources that are in the area. And so here they're pretty much just storing up as much food as they can. They're trying to put the pollen and whatever we talk about, any pollen. A little hard to see, but in this cell here, there's like a orange little goo drops in there. That's what they call bee bread. So the pollen you get from nature is the proteins in there are kind of sealed in by the pollen coating, and the bees have a hard time eating that. I mean, we have a hard time eating it too. And so what they do is they'll pack it in these cells, and then they'll add some fungus from the top of their head and some honey, and they'll have, oh, there she is. There's the queen. The red dot on her. See her running? And they'll make bee bread. And so that pollen ferments. And when the pollen ferments, then it's digestible. So you can see her, she's looking around for something to do. She has a red mark on her, so that indicates to anyone what year she was born. Red was this year. White was last year. I believe the next color we have is yellow, coming up for 2019.
So it's amazing how nimble she is.
Oh yeah, she's quick. Oh yeah, she's quick. She's got a big abdomen on her, but her abdomen looks a little small, and I'm pretty sure it's because that she's slowed down laying eggs, so her ovaries aren't producing eggs all the time right now. I'm sure she's looking for a spot to lay to finish it off, to use up whatever eggs, fertilized eggs she has left, and then she'll wait on until spring, and when the new nectar flow starts up, the bees will indicate to her that there's enough resources coming in that they can start laying eggs again. And once enough resources come in and start laying eggs, the hive can bounce back and start making new bees for the next year. Yeah, so these bees are going to tough it out till about February, and then their life's going to be to the end, and then they have to make new ones to take care of their next set. Yeah. Given the time of year that we're in, we would have to combine these bees to another hive that has a queen. If it was, say, April, May, June, July, if we squished her or something happened to her, she died, these bees would start to make a new queen. They would single out fresh eggs, and they would feed them only royal jelly and draw their cells out to what they call queen cells. And that cell will just be set up to make a queen. And they usually make about, a hive this size, they might make 3 to 5 queens. If I had multiple boxes up here, they could make up to 20 queens at a time. The idea is not all of them are going to make it, and also the first queen that hatches out will go around and kill the rest. And if she doesn't get them all, the hive will then continue to swarm with virgin queens until the hive gets queen right, where they will select a virgin queen, and she'll own the hive. She'll go out on multiple mating flights to mate with drones until she mates with about 10 to 20, and that's to give her a differentiation in semen, so that every bee that comes out of here is a little bit different in genetic code. Ones can take the heat better, ones can take the cold better, just something a little bit different to diversify the hive so that it has a surviving chance. And that way they're not all exact copies of the same bee over and over again. When that mated queen comes back to the hive, she stays in that hive for life. The only reason why she would leave again is if the hive gets so abundant, there's no more room to lay, she'll leave with half the bees and swarm and make a new hive, and then the process starts over again. They're queenless, they make new queens, those queens hatch out, they pick the best one, they mate, and then the hive just goes over and she keeps building. The hive gets big again, and then they swarm. So the swarming is a way for the hive to reproduce. That's their way of passing the lineage on. If a hive can swarm 2, 3, 4 times a year, it gives it that much more of a chance for those bees to make it. One thing to keep in mind though is winter is the hardest time for beekeepers due to the fact that we can lose well over 60% of our hives every winter due to moisture problems, lack of food, cold weather, too much rain, bears, skunks, raccoons, fires, things like that, flooding. I've definitely seen hives flood. All those scenarios add to the reason of why bees don't always make it through the winter.
Once rain starts, do you cover these things, or?
No, they'll stay just like this when the rains start. Some things that we will do though is we will put a pitch on the hive, like that, so that if there's any moisture or water that's inside the hive, it will be to the front of the hive and then go out. That way there's no pooling water inside. That brings in bacteria, disease, and of course moisture, which the bees have a hard time combating. Yeah. So that's the basics of it. So right now they're looking for food, looking for nectar and pollen. They're bringing that in, storing it as much as they can. They worked really hard all year to store honey, so that way they have food to last through the winter. They'll consume the honey in the cold months and use it to vibrate, to heat up their muscles, to create this hive to stay around 96 to 98 degrees. And that's what they need. Some people ask, well, does it get too cold? Are they going to freeze? And keep in mind, beehives have been kept in snowy conditions where snow completely surrounds the hive. And it's not the cold that gets to them with the snow. It's more or less the snow blocking their entrance so they can't leave and go back out. In the wintertime, which is coming up really close, you'll soon realize that the bees are only leaving the hive just to go to the bathroom, and they come right back. So the bees don't go to the bathroom inside the hive, they go outside. So we get days like this, we call them cleansing flights, because they've been locked up for weeks at a time with rain or too cold to move. And when they get a day kind of like today, they'll go out, grab any food they can, go to the bathroom, and then come right back, and then keep the hive warm and protected. Fortunately, winter's not the most exciting time for beekeeping because we're kind of wrapping the year up. But come March, these bees will be a whole new set of girls in there working, and the hive will be in a whole new mindset to expand and grow as fast as they can before next winter gets here. So with a bee crisis where there's large amounts of hive death or bee mortality, a lot of it comes down to the point of pesticide use. And unfortunately, the way our agriculture works is we have large crops of single items, single vegetables or fruits grown in large spaces and monocropped. Either it's just spinach or just corn or just blueberries or just something else. And when you add a lot more of one thing to an area of a higher density or population, there's a bigger chance of disease and problems happening that require farmers to use fungicides, insecticides, and herbicides. And those three have a direct effect on the bees. One, insecticides, obviously bees are insects, so the more that we use those, the harder it is on them. They bring those poisons back inside the hive, and they in turn infect the young. The fungicides have a really special effect on them because earlier when we talked about the bee bread, where they bring in pollen and they mix honey with it, they add a fungus that's on the bee's body to the bee bread, which then helps it ferment. So if the bees get in contact with the fungicide, they can't exactly make their bee bread because they don't have the fungus required to do the fermentation. And with the herbicides, or especially systemic, where the pesticide is either in the pollen, the nectar, or the plant itself, those bees will take those back, bring them home, and then feed them to their young, and now the young have weaker immune systems, or the youngs die, or it allows other pathogens to come into the hive, whether it be a bacteria or a virus that the bees can contract. So those three things are kind of the big pusher of why bees are having a rough time. Also, because of how agriculture is set up and there's such large crops being grown at one time, The bee industry, for the commercial aspect, is required to bring in more and more bees to do pollinations of crops. And the more beehives we bring into areas, and I'm talking like they bring tens to hundreds of thousands of hives in, all those bees start mixing and sharing different bacterias and viruses that are happening. So it's not so bad if you have a few hives here and there, but when you start increasing your number of hives, you can reach a point where the virus loads of one hive can start affecting multiple hives throughout the area. In Humboldt County, we've seen a big jump in people wanting to participate in beekeeping and be a part of it and learn more, which is great because education is the first step to bringing people to awareness of what's going on. And also it makes it hands-on so people have a connection to the beehives. I've seen Humboldt County bees have a rough time, but I've also seen them coming back. So I feel that the number of bees and the health of the bees in Humboldt County is on a rise. Just because one of our main things, our demographic is consciously aware of what we're putting in our gardens or what they're putting in their mouths. So they understand that there's a direct correlation between pesticides and herbicides and fungicides that affect the bees that pollinate all of our crops. Buying local is definitely a good idea. One, for the economy, you'll keep your money in the same area that you live in. Two, it will help increase local ag, which will make it more viable for farmers in our local area to keep doing the healthy practices that they are doing and not having to resort to maybe a commercial aspect or cutting corners to use pesticides to increase their yields. Buying local also gives you the chance to know where your food came from, and not so much as this is a mango or a citrus or a banana or something that only comes from South America or somewhere out of the country. Buying local will definitely help the bees have a chance because people want to produce more, and one aspect of bees that people don't realize is they increase the production yield of ag. There's plenty of studies done where they've screened off orchards and not let bees pollinate, and the amount of apples per tree comes out saying about 30 to 50. And when they re-let bees back in there to do the pollination, it jumps to 300 to 400. So if a farmer can yield an extra, 10 times yield per tree because the bees are able to come in and do the job for them, then it's only a benefit for the farmer to produce more apples or more product for the local consumers to enjoy. So let's touch base on the products. There's a few main ones. The main one a lot of people love and know is honey. Another product is wax, and another one is pollen, and the fourth one is propolis. So honey is a natural sugar. Diabetics can digest it and break it down. The benefits of honey for allergy purposes or medicinal would be raw honey and local. There's not much of a benefit to you if you're eating honey from Australia. The trees and shrubs and stuff that grow in Australia are way different than the stuff that grows up here. And the fact that the honey is raw means that it hasn't been pasteurized. A lot of times in the honey industry you'll see the word pure honey on there, but 9 out of 10 times pure honey has gone through a pasteurization process where it's been pasteurized, brought up to 120 degrees, and that then breaks down the pollen grains so that you're not receiving the benefit from it. And it also kills 13 beneficial bacteria that are located within inside the bee's honey stomach. The bees have two stomachs. One of them is for their digestion of food, just like us, and the second one is just a storage tank. The storage tank that just brings in the nectar and honey has beneficial bacteria, probiotics, that we can benefit from if we eat raw. It's hard to find unfiltered honey, but as close to unfiltered as you can get would give you the best result. A lot of times filters filter out pollen grains, Sometimes they can trap other particulates in there that you may lose from it, but it's rare to find honey that's not filtered, because in the process of removing honey there's bee wings and antennas and legs. So unless you see those in your unfiltered honey, I would be curious to find out that it's actually filtered to a point. It's just not very appealing for the consumer to have bee appendages in the honey. The wax is used for a number of things: cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, candles. I've seen it as wax paper, but like it's used for wrapping food in instead of using aluminum foil or plastic, and it's reusable. Many things people don't realize is lotions and shampoos and makeups all have a base, or hair products have a base of beeswax. So that's got a great bonus to it. The pollen, if you can get the pollen, and especially if you can get bee bread, pollen's really high in protein. It definitely will help if you can eat it, so your body can build up immunity to it, so your allergies during the spring and summer aren't as bad. Propolis is a really neat one. It's antimicrobial, antifungal, and antibacterial. The bees gather it from tree sap and shrub resins, and they bring it back to the home and they mix it with honey, and they use it to cover the insides of the hive with a small film of propolis. This way it's sterilized, it's clean, the bees can use it as medicine if they need to. Humans have used it for hundreds of purposes medicinally. People use it on cavities to suffocate the bacteria. People put it in tinctures for sore throat medications, cough drops, a lot of cough syrups as well. So propolis has a big medical bonus for it. And those are the four main products you can get from a beehive. Today we got to go through some beehives and check them out. After seeing this, some of you guys might be interested in keeping bees yourself, or knowing more about things you can do to help native pollinators or bees in your area. One outlet is the Humboldt County Beekeeper Association. They meet the first Thursday of every month at the Ag Building off Humboldt Hill. You can go to the Humboldt County Beekeepers website, and there'll be info about events, educational talks, workshops that go on. It's a non-profit, so they can always use some support, or you can feel free to contact me. I keep bees. I have a business called R&R Apiaries, located in Arcata, California, and my number is 707-502-9611. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if you guys want to start beekeeping, I can definitely point you in the right direction.